everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on 7 ways to grab attention when opening your presentation. Peter Dew's my name. I specialise in helping people become confident, effective and influential in their public speaking, in their presentations, in their ability to facilitate groups of people. And one of the ways that we start can make a difference to how much impact we have. And I know none of you would want to take the risk, agree to do a presentation, get out of your comfort zone and kind of fall flat because you don't engage the audience. And one of the ways to engage the audience is by starting strong up front. One of the biggest problems with public speaking is a soft opening, a soft starting. So welcome, let's get underway. How to participate, ask questions, type in comments, apply to your own circumstances. I do record this webinar, so if I skip over something that you wish to review, just be aware that the recording will be available should you want to review and check out any of the content further. Apply to your own life is the one that matters in my view. So when I say apply, think of a previous presentation that you've done. How did you start? What was your attention grabber up front? Or if you've got a presentation coming up before Christmas in the new year, is there something you're going to change as a result of today's webinar just to have more impact when you start up front? So why open strong? And that is the first question. So I'm going to give you a little bit of science, kind of a bit of a rule, and also a metaphor that will hopefully crystallize why opening strong is so important, so valuable. Before I take a step back, people often ask me, should I start with an icebreaker? So you go to a workshop and everyone says, right, let's go around the room and introduce ourselves. Let's play a game of human bingo. Who travelled the furthest? Let's form a line on how far we've travelled. Ask each person 3 questions. And there's all these different types of icebreakers. I'm not saying don't use icebreakers. I would use an icebreaker a little bit further into the presentation. And the rule with icebreakers is it must relate directly and add value to the content of your workshop. A superfluous icebreaker, just to get to know each other better, just to get an understanding of who's in the room, that doesn't layer the learning or add to the learning, to me is just hot air. And when I'm a participant and I start a presentation in that way, the facilitator, the speaker, the trainer has often lost me. There needs to be a reason to start with an icebreaker. So let's get back to the presentation. So the rule of primacy, I mentioned some science. Yep, so the rule of primacy. The rule of primacy says that first words that you say matter. According to behavioral psychologists, the first words that people say, people remember. So it's valuable real estate in terms of the spoken word. Hence the starting strong. That 15 to 30 seconds will grab people's attention. It will create relevance. It will let them know they're in the right room. It will give them hope. So if the first 30 seconds is polite introduction and a little bit of housekeeping, morning tea will be at 10:30, toilets are down the back, can I ask you to turn your mobile phones on silence, then people are going to remember that apparently. It's the first words the freshest words, the rule of primacy. Apparently, people are going to remember it. So therefore, it's valuable real estate. So the saying I align to this is first words matter. And don't do a soft opening. I'm really pleased to be here. We're going to have a lovely, lovely day. I know some of you travelled a long way, toilets out the back. That's a nice, soft, polite introduction, but it doesn't create the impact. The metaphor that I'm going to use, and this is becoming less valuable because more and more people don't read newspapers, don't read magazines, all their content is online. But even if you look at online content and you go through your Facebook feed or you're looking for YouTube videos, and even with YouTube videos, it's often the first 15 seconds that we view, and if that's boring, we will zone out or we'll move to another video. So it's like reading a newspaper. I have read the newspaper this morning. I get up early, I go to a coffee shop and I read the paper. Do I read every article from front to back? No, I don't. There's articles I skip over, then there's articles I read the whole article. How do I determine which articles to read fully and which articles to gloss over and skip? And the answer is the headline. If the headline and the first sentence grabs my attention, the first 15 seconds, I will then read further into the article and decide I'm going to read the whole article. If the headline does not interest me, I'll turn the page. So your opening statement really determines whether your audience zones out, thinks about dinner, what they've got planned for the weekend, or whether their ears prick up and say, wow, this I need to listen to. So that is the rule of primacy. Seven strategies. The first is to ask a rhetorical question. What would you do if this applied to you? How would you deal with the situation? And then that gets people thinking. The rhetorical question needs to relate to what the audience is in the room for. If they're a group of people in their 60s, my age, they're transitioning to retirement, they're worried about if they've got enough superannuation, and a financial planner might start, how would you survive on $450 a week? Think of your current lifestyle, what you do, going out for dinner, the holidays, spending money on your grandchildren, and now you have to survive on $450 a week. How would you survive? Good morning, everyone. My name's Peter Dew. I'm a financial planner, and I'm going to talk to you about the importance of superannuation and how you can enjoy that retirement lifestyle that you deserve. You can ask that rhetorical question. You're not expecting people to respond. Most of you in the room chose what you're going to eat for breakfast this morning. Most of you choose what you're going to eat for dinner. Just imagine if you had no choice in what you were going to eat for your breakfast, for your lunch, and for your dinner. The foods you liked were not served. There was no regard. Imagine that. Good morning, everyone. My name's Peter Dew, and I want to talk to you about the topic of elder abuse and how many of our retired parents, grandparents, aunties and uncles do not get to enjoy, do not get to eat the food that they would ordinarily eat, that they would prefer to eat. They have no choice. What are you going to say, that rhetorical question that grabs attention, creates relevance, and sets people up for the topic that you're going to talk on? Elder abuse. transitioning to retirement from a financial planning perspective. Be controversial. Say something that's unexpected in relation to the topic. And that could be that the only way forward for this company is to close the business down. Unless we become more efficient, more creative, and more innovative, we really need to close this business down, which means most of you will be out of your job. Now, I'm not recommending start that way, but what could you say that's going to grab people's attention, be a little bit controversial? Controversial topics, less so now, would be euthanasia, medical marijuana. Should we legalise marijuana? The future of nuclear energy. The debate's happening right now as we need to reduce our greenhouse gases. So when you're talking about maybe the future of energy and the need to go to renewables, and you put forward one of the best ways of becoming carbon neutral is to use nuclear reactors to generate electricity. This is the only way that we're going to become carbon neutral and reduce our greenhouse gases. Many people in the room, I imagine, would get their heckles up and say, but we don't support nuclear energy, it's not safe, we've got a waste product of plutonium, and there's got to be alternative methods. All right, oil and gas, we need to reduce that. Nuclear energy may not be the answer. So what are we going to do? What strategies are we going to do to reduce our carbon footprint? How can you be controversial? Ask that question that really causes some difficulty for people, and then move on with some answers and some ideas that's less controversial. But you've got their attention because they don't want the controversy to be the way forward. Make an eye-catching or an ear-catching or a gut-wrenching statement. So once again, this is the element of surprise. The rhetorical question is asking people, imagine what? But this is more around something that really causes a visceral response. And you probably know that we've got 3 bundles of neurons. We've got in our brain, we think. This is where most neurons are. In our heart, we've got neurons, a cluster of neurons called the bundle of His, and they send beat, beat, beat to the heart. And in our gut, we've got some neurons that are linked to the brain, and we have these gut instincts. We make decisions based on gut instinct, on whether it's the right way or the wrong way. We feel it down here. It's called a visceral response. So what can you say that will create a visceral response to the people in the room? Use a relevant and powerful quote. One of the ways I start a presentation is by quoting Sir Winston Churchill. Sir Winston Churchill said, if you can stand on your feet and speak to a group of people, then you possess a very powerful skill. What did Winston Churchill mean by that? The ability to educate, to influence, to change with the spoken word is a really powerful skill. Then I'll step into, good morning everyone, my name's Peter. I'm here today to talk to you about effective public speaking, a skill that is so relevant, so important, so valuable. And Winston Churchill was a great orator and a great speaker. So I've used the quote to set the scene for my public speaking workshop. Another workshop I do is around the fear of public speaking. And I use a quote from Mark Twain. Mark Twain said there's 2 kinds of speakers on this planet. Those that are very, very nervous, most of us in the room, And number two, those that are liars about being nervous. And the great thing about this quote from Mark Twain is what he's saying is everyone gets nervous. And if you're not nervous, if you don't have some anxiety, a little bit of fear around public speaking, you're probably not being truthful. Another quote around public speaking comes from a Harvard professor a long time ago, Ralph Waldo Emerson. He said, all the great speakers were bad speakers once. So in other words, all those speakers you admire, maybe you've watched, you've seen, they do a really good job, weren't necessarily natural speakers. They've done the work. And I'll lead this into the message around public speaking as a skill. And you can build this skill, this ability to be effective in your public speaking. What quotation can you use that will create relevance for people in the room? Susan Jeffers said, feel the fear and do it anyway. So the only way to overcome your fear of public speaking is to do more public speaking. Use a relevant quote. Tell a story. Tell a story that creates relevance, that lets people know. At the moment around Australia, there's a lot of debate, a lot of changes in policy, a lot of addressing the issue of sexual harassment in the workplace and, men behaving badly. Our Australian of the Year is a lady named Grace Tame. And she starts by telling her gut-wrenching, amazing story of being groomed by her male teacher. And she has everyone in the room in the palm of her hand. And then later on, she goes into strategies, what we need to do, what needs to change, what government needs to do, what we as a nation needs to do, what men need to do in terms of calling out bad behaviour amongst their mates when men go out together, when we see other men behaving badly towards women, having the courage to call it out. Lots of call to actions, lots of strategies, but the story up front grabs attention. I bring my story very early into my presentation around overcoming your fear of public speaking. I'm a person who stutters, and for a long time in my life, I wasn't able to speak and I avoided all sorts of public speaking. I now do this for my living. I run workshops, I speak at conferences, I run webinars, I coach individuals, leaders to be more effective in their public speaking. And when I'm on stage, my story up front of struggle, of being bullied, of being denied promotion, of being assumed that I'm unintelligent because of my stutter and my inability to communicate, that generally grabs people's attention, lets them know that they're in the right room and that they too can become effective, confident, and influential public speakers. What story for the topic you're going to use, the topic you're going to share, what story can you use? Your own story is great. Sometimes you borrow stories. Sometimes there's case studies. Sometimes there's clients you've worked with. So I open with a bit of a rhetorical question around financial planning. What would you do if you're in your 60s? How would you survive on $450 per week? The old age pension. Many people would struggle. A financial planner could go to a story. So there's this gentleman I worked with who came to me at age 60 and he had basically no superannuation and his retirement plan was non-existent and it was looking very bleak. So what I did was we set up this plan. Now this gentleman now works, still receives a part pension, works part-time, has built up some superannuation, is delaying drawing from his superannuation, and he is now set up for a comfortable retirement and a lifestyle that he wouldn't have been able to achieve without that financial advice. a story, a case study. If you're going to use case studies, you're going to share people's stories, you may need to de-identify it. In the mining sector, one of the problems with long 12-hour shifts, FIFO, 10 days on, 4 days off, is fatigue. One supervisor was doing a presentation on fatigue. Don't drive tired, don't work tired. And he gave permission for people to pull over, radio in, look, I'm tired, I need to have a rest, a micro sleep. And it was very factual, very informative, statistics, you know, what it's like after driving 12 hours without sleep. It's like, you know, being 0.1 in blood alcohol, you know, data, statistics, numbers, very informative. But it didn't have the impact I think it could have. And I said, have you got a story? And he said, well, when I first started 10 years ago, I myself had a motor vehicle accident. I nearly died. I wrote the vehicle off. I survived because I fell asleep at the wheel about 10 minutes away from camp. So I got him to start with the story. When he was talking about fatigue and what the strategies were to avoid fatigue, by starting with a story, he's ignoring his tiredness and nearly dying on a mine site as a result of fatigue, sets the story, sets the scene, shares the story, shows authenticity, shows that him, the leader, the boss, is also not perfect. What story can you use to set the scene at the front of your presentation? So paint a picture of the future. And this can be a little bit controversial. And of course, Al Gore talks about an inconvenient truth. Now, this is 20 years ago. An inconvenient truth was around climate change. And he painted a very bleak future that, as we know from the recent conference in Scotland, that inconvenient truth is a little bit closer than it was 20 years ago. The inconvenient truth of climate change, of global warming. Another inconvenient truth is food security of the planet. How are we going to feed the approaching 8 billion people? Water security. And if you look at how much fresh water we have on the planet, it's only about 3%. The rest is not potable water. So how do we conserve and reduce and save our fresh water? I was working with one of the water corporations in Victoria, and one of the people started their presentation with a powerful metaphor. He said, I want you to take a bucket of water. So just a normal household bucket of water. And now I want you to get an eyedropper and add one more drop of water to that bucket of water, just one drop. That is how much fresh water we have on this planet. The eyedropper drop of water into that bucket represents how much fresh water we have on the planet. Funny how I remember that, grabbed attention. Then he went into strategies to reduce, recycle, and there's a third R, our water, ways to conserve, to recycle, and maybe find additional fresh water. Paint a picture of the future and then move into your strategies. That'll grab people's attention. And the last one, start with some amazing statistics. Something that's thought-provoking, jaw-dropping, and please use reputable data. At any one time, and I've already started about elder abuse around not having the choice of food. Imagine if you couldn't have the breakfast, the lunch, the dinner you wanted. 15,000 West Australians, so that's here in West Australia for those of you over east, 15,000 West Australians over the age of 65 every year experience elder abuse. That's 15,000 West Australians experience elder abuse. That's our uncles, our aunties, our grandparents. What statistic can you use to grab attention? Another statistic I've used is around family and domestic violence, and it is the number of women that lose their life at the hands of a partner, a former husband, and it is quite jaw-dropping. What statistic can you use to grab attention? So just going through these, there is other ways of starting. You notice an icebreaker is not one of the ways I've used. If you've got a good icebreaker that relates directly to your message, your core message, you could start with an icebreaker. But ask a rhetorical question. Be controversial. Use a statement that creates a gut, visceral response. Quotation, Mark Twain said there's two kinds of speakers, those that are nervous and those that are liar. Tell a story. Paint a picture, an inconvenient truth. Start with an amazing statistic. 15,000 West Australians over the age of 65 experience elder abuse. 1 in 5 Australians will experience mental ill health at some stage during their life. I've got some upcoming webinars, those of you who are webinar junkies. Next week, Tuesday the 14th of December, 6 ways to create great content that influences your audience. So what can you put in your content? I've spoken about the opening, which needs to lead into your content. Now, next week, I'm going to speak about how to create the content. Later January, what habits make successful speakers? As a professional speaker, trainer, and coach, I not only deliver a lot of presentations, I also watch other people speak. And what is it that those people do? So I've distilled out the habits, the things that people do that make them great speakers. And the other thing I'm going to talk about on the 24th of January is being authentic, authenticity. One workshop, soft sell, one workshop coming up in Perth on the 14th of February. There will be other workshops in later Feb and March that will be launching early in 2022. Whoever registers for this workshop will also get my latest book. Thanks. That's a difficult question. The art of off-the-cuff speaking. That's also will be launched in 2022, but anyone who attends that workshop. You know how to reach me, comments, questions, any other ideas for how to open a presentation. I would appreciate your feedback. How do you open a presentation? Have you seen someone open a presentation that really grabbed your attention? Final summary, how are you going to open your next presentation? Which one of these 7 strategies or what other strategy might you use? So Peter Dew's my name, public speaking trainer and coach. And remember, how you open, the rule of primacy, those first words really matter.